Welcome back to Dr. Supercoach YouTube. You're on with Pig, and I'm continuing my pre-season series in which I get to sit down and chat with some of my favourite Supercoach content creators. Today, I'm talking with a man that has two top 10 Supercoach finishes in 2020 and 2021, one of the most consistent and knowledgeable coaches in the game, the co-host of Moreira's Magic Supercoach podcast alongside Selby. Welcome to the podcast, Tommy.
Thanks for having me, Pig. It's great to be on Chat and Supercoach with you. We've sort of chatted offline a few times over the last couple of years, and I think we both have a very similar philosophy. So it's going to be great to catch up and talk Supercoach. And I think being on the Dr. Supercoach platform as well, kind of the OGs of Supercoach content creating. It's really an honour to be on and chatting with you. So thanks for having me.
Well, thanks very much for coming on. And like you said, we chat in DMs a few times, and the reason I wanted to, you're actually when I first kind of thought of this series that I'd create, yours was actually the first name that I wanted to get on and chat to, because over the years I feel like your play style of how you play Supercoach, me as a listener, has been the one I've aligned to most. And I'm like, if I'm thinking of doing something, and then I'll listen to Moreira's Magic and I'll be, oh, Tommy said the same thing. Oh, how good. So that's kind of why one of the reasons I wanted to get you on, because I feel like we both had a very similar philosophy, both had some good finishes because of it. Last year didn't quite go as well. I threw that philosophy out the window and did a few stupid things. And you still had a reasonably good finish last year. But what we want to talk about today is just some learnings. Like, we both at the end of the year got our notes pad out and wrote down a bunch of learnings from 2024. And that's what I kind of want to go through today and have a chat to you about. And I know Supercoach is evolving so much, it changes every year. Like when we were having more success, it was probably more guns and rookies. It's now getting maybe further towards mid-price madness, but I mean, I think there's still a case for both. So it'd be really interesting to have a chat about that and our learnings with you today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think every year is different because you sort of play the cards that you're dealt in terms of the players that are available, the price points that they're at, what rookies are available. And even though, yeah, I think we're getting closer to that mid-price madness, that value hunting based on the amount of trades we've got. There's the buys that changed things up last year, and we'll go through our learnings. And I think one of my learnings was sort of about going about guns and rooks based on the buys, but the value is just too great this year that it sort of cancels it out. So is that going to be the right strategy moving forward? Who knows? So it's always good to talk it through, and you play the cards that you're dealt, and I think that's the number one thing that you've got to be conscious of is going in with a set mindset is probably the thing that's going to make it the most hard for you as you move forward.
Yeah, I think that's right. And this actually came up in my chats in this series with both Selby and JD that every year's different. Like, it's whoever you get. Like, one year we got a Canelio at 200k that became a keeper. We probably don't have anyone doing that this year, who knows, but there's probably a lot of 400k guys that could at least go close, whereas, who knows, next year there might not be any of them. So I think you're right, playing the hands that you're dealt. But one of the things that I think can be applied year to year, and it's really, really hard to do, is kind of trying not to pay top dollar for anyone. So I've got in my learnings, don't buy anyone over 600k. Now that's really going to be difficult to do, especially when we see the guys like Caleb Sarong last year that started the year going 130. I think we all paid up, well, a lot of people paid 630, 640 for him because you thought he was going to keep going 120, 130. But I mean, just the balance of probabilities, the fact that he has gone that high at the start means he's probably going to do a lot less at the end. So the don't buy anyone over 600k rule that I'd love to stick to, I do think actually in the moment in the season, it's just so hard to do.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think it's a great rule to try and come in with, but in practicality, it's so hard. I think sort of the way that I try and approach picking my side is obviously everyone knows that rookies dictate your structure, but then the value players, the players that are also going to make cash, the players that are going to outperform their price at a number by a significant amount that makes them really good rookie generators or really good underpriced keepers that are going to be able to make that 15, 20, 30 points. They come first. And I guess it sort of depends on where you land with how much cash you got at the end of the day. And that's kind of how I like to pick my side. So if I've got 640,000 left over, and I don't want to pick anyone else. I'm not going to pick an Ollie Wines, for example, last year, who I did pick, but like one of those sort of underpriced, maybe keepers, maybe not, maybe stepping stones, just because I've got the cash there. I think that's how you can find yourself making a team that's not optimized, and you're better off just paying up to get someone that's going to stick in your side rather than someone that you're going to have to trade out that's going to perform close enough to their price at just because you've got the cash there. So I think it's a great rule to stick to, but I don't really mind having that last player that you put in your side being someone that you've paid up for if the cash is there.
Yeah, and a lot of people will make the argument that it's the over 600k guys who are going to be your captain options. So I can definitely see that being a point of view. I don't mind the idea, like, I'm trying to look at a team that's all starting under 600k, and I'm like, could I get a captain out of guys like Brayshaw, Nank, Whitfield? Like, I probably could, but if I just had a Max Gawn instead, it's just so much safer.
Yeah, I think if anyone could get the captain out of that mob, I'm sure you can. So that's a little bit of a confidence that would make that a good selection. But yeah, I think it's just like at the end of the day, if you're going to miss out on someone that's 350k that's got you think can outperform their price by a significant margin, and make a really good amount of money. You pick that player over a $640,000 player every day, I think. But yeah, you don't pick someone that's maybe going to get there. So I always like to have a good captain. I think it always works out that there is. I've certainly got one in my mock-ups this far, and it's just because the cash is there, and I don't really like anyone else that's sort of the value, and I don't want to end up with too many mid-prices on my field.
Yeah, that's fair. And this year it seems like we've been given so much value, especially in the forward line, but even in defence with guys like Mills and maybe Roberts, who knows. So maybe a couple spending ups, not too bad. One of the things you sent me through some of your learnings that you wanted to chat about, and one of the things that's a key theme throughout it is kind of patience, being patient. You said, like, we had 40 trades, we had more trades last year, but we still found a way to run out of trades. With our boost, we got trigger happy, things like that. So yeah, do you want to chat a bit about your learnings and what you think about the being patient with some of these guys that you're selecting for a reason, but then maybe they have a bad game or two and a lot of people want to throw them in the bin straight away?
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, like, this is such a game of patience, and it's so hard because you're given the trades to upgrade your team, and every trade that you make should be progressing you forward. And at the time when you press that confirm trade button, you certainly think it does. You wouldn't press it if it didn't, but it's not always the case. And I think early on in the season, particularly in those first couple of rounds, like, they're the time that we want to use trades to make corrections. They're the time that we want to use those trades to jump off those players that we've made mistakes on and bring in the players that I guess are going to hurt us from an opposition perspective. But I think last year we seen it with Young, with Martin, that we moved off these players, and we'd seen in the preseason, everyone had done the research that had him. It was CBAs in Young's case. He was a really good ball user. He was really attacking going forward. He had high tackle numbers, and he was getting slaughtered because of the clangers that he was racking up. But we knew he was a great ball user. It was one of the things that he was coming in to the AFL with. So the chances that would turn around were high, but everyone just panicked. I was one of them. I moved him on, and I brought him back 2 weeks later. And I think you've got to trust that early research, and that is not the type of trades that you want to be doing when you can make those corrections. For me, it's about moving on those rookies and bringing in the right ones. That's the only real purpose for that. Like, if you're picking someone that, like, if you've spent the whole preseason with, and Martin was one of my first picked, and Young was certainly there as well, and I really wanted to move them both on just because I think I had FOMO. I seen everyone else doing it. I didn't want to be left holding the bag. But like, I'd done the research. I'd made that pick for the right reasons, and they both worked out. And it's not always going to happen, but I also don't think that they're the types of players that are going to kill you. Like, when you look at like a Young or a Martin, what they're going to average at the worst case scenario, sort of what they were coming. Like, obviously Young was really poor, but you knew that was going to come up. Was that going to come up to an 85, to a 90? And was that good enough to just get you through to the buys? Because you could have fixed the rookies that was going to generate you the cash, that was going to make you the money, that was going to help you get that upgrade to who it should have been. So for me, I think, yeah, like, feels like it's that short-term sugar hit every single time that you move them on. You get someone that might be better in the short term, but it does hurt your team in the long run. And looking back at my team from last year, that's 100% what happened. I moved on the players that I probably shouldn't have, which meant I couldn't get the right rookies, which meant that I was chasing my ass or my tail the whole year. So I think, patience has to be the key. And it probably comes into every single element of my learnings that I sort of took out of last year.
That's probably the best learning we can take of it, because I fully agree with you. I moved on Young and Grundy kind of before they had that price drop. But the guys I brought in, like I think it was English, and I'm not sure who the other one was. But then English plummeted so much more cash than the other ones. And that's the time of the year that you should actually, like you said, be getting the right rookies in. So I think me and you, like getting rid of Young in my spot, I used that trade getting rid of Young, and I didn't get in Sam Darcy. So I never got Sam Darcy or Ollie Dempsey because I was making these correctional trades in the 4 and 500k tier. Whereas I think you're very correct that you should be making the correctional trades in the rookie tier to get the right rookies on your field or on your bench that are going to make you money. And that was one of my learnings as well that I've got written down. Trust your preseason research. Like, we're picking these guys for a reason. I mean, I can see why we did it, because Martin put out a couple, and Young, they both put out some 60s in those first 2 rounds. But I guess that means for the people starting, people like Jaden Short or Bailey Smith or Matt Roberts around those mid 400s, if they put out 260s, our advice is probably to hold them. But I can see how that's really hard to do as well, obviously, because last year we all got sucked into it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's it sort of comes back to the preseason research. Like for me, Short's not one that I'm sort of seriously considering, and I think I'd probably anticipate him to probably come out and put up some mediocre scores. He's going to be decent, but is he going to be that player that's going to outperform his price? So I think if your research and what you think he's going to do is well and truly over that, he's going to average 105 and be a knockout pick. You got to see that through. There's no point blowing it up after one round. So I think for me, you've just got to see it through. That's your pick, and at the worst case scenario, he's probably going to get back to the price that you paid for him. That's the absolute worst case scenario. So he's not going to lose you anything. You're going to lose some points on field, but what you can do is start generating that money underneath. And I think for me, that's got to be the most important thing moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, not the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is they could get injured or whatever. But if they're playing full games, they should just hover, and that's not great, because you want a lot of people in your team making money. You want people at 400k making money. But if they hover, it's not the end of the world. And then that kind of flows into one of my other learnings, that was hold primos or mid prices until their mid-season buy if you can. We saw some of the best teams last year. Pistol and I went through and looked at the top 20. They all held Young, Martin, Grundy until their buy, but they also held guys like D'Ambrosio and Amon and those kind of tiered down mid-pricer cash cows. They held them all the way through to their mid-season buy, and then that's when they upgraded them. And it probably flows into what some of the stuff I was talking with Mini Monk about. Those kind of players actually are really good, because then you're not fielding a rookie on field. So, I mean, they might just be giving you solid 90s. They might get to where you think is maxed out in price, and that's fine. But then they'll probably just hover there for 4 or 5 weeks. So you don't have to cash them out like right at the top. You can let them hover for 5 weeks to get buy coverage as well, is something that some of the best teams do.
Yeah, for sure. 100% agree. I think one of my big ones from last year as well was around the upgrade cadence. And I think that comes into that, because I was as one of those. I moved on rookies before they matured. I moved on mid prices while they were hovering or had potential to score more, instead of rookies that weren't making money, just because I wanted to maintain one, upgrade cadence with people that I was seeing that were making trades. But it was also to try and get to, I guess, a primo side before anyone else. And I think one of the things that's come in with the buy rounds, round 0, the boosts, is we're getting to full, well, I was last year, in terms of like looking at my team, I was full premium. I wasn't happy with the premiums that I had, but I was full premium pre-buy. And that really pigeonholed me into, one, I've used so many trades, so how am I going to be able to navigate these buys? Because I've moved on all these mid prices that could have given me decent scores on field. I don't have the trades there. I don't have enough cash gen to upgrade that 550 midfielder to a 621 to actually get some really nice scores. And it really just like wedged me into a position where if I'd sort of sat 2 weeks behind that upgrade cadence and held the D'Ambrosios and the likes a little bit longer and focused on that cash gen, you lose 100 to 200 points over 4 or 5 rounds because you're a little bit slower than everyone else. But do you come through the buys putting up bigger scores because you can actually trade around them and do those upgrades of players coming off buys and then attack the end of the season with more money and a better team. I think for me, for sure, and I think that's probably where I've gone wrong mostly over the last couple of years, and how I feel like this is probably going off topic of where you started, but I feel like so much of the adjustments that everyone's made, or me particular, around having these extra trades, having the buy rounds, having the boost, is just hitting the season head on and just trying to upgrade as soon as possible. And I don't think it's making my teams better. So I haven't really heard many people just saying slow down, double downgrade, don't trade if you don't have to through this preseason, which might mean I'm a little bit off track with how I want to attack it. But at the same time, looking at my teams, it's where I've gone wrong. And it's also, there were different games when I came top 10, but it was also where I did so well. One year I was sort of around the mark the whole year, but the second year I just came home with a wet sail because I just saved all my trades and was able to make upgrades through the buys really well, but also be able to address injuries and bring in really good players for injuries rather than, Charlie Curnow last year, who obviously didn't perform because that was the best I could afford. And I think if you're playing, you've got 6 rounds to go and you're picking up the best player that you can afford to cover the hole, you're not in a great position. But if you slowed things down and maybe just took that one extra week of upgrading and focused on your rookies, double downgraded, whatever it meant, so you could actually upgrade to the best player, I think when you get to that end of the season, that's not going to be the best player. And I think that 6 weeks of not Charlie Curnow and actually, Dylan Moore is probably going to result in a hell of a lot more points than you made from those 2 weeks of upgrading a little bit sooner.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think there is something to be said about it. Probably dovetails a little bit with one of my learnings, was especially those top tier rookies. Try and hold them a bit longer. Like we are cashing our rookies out really early because we want to get that upgrade cadence going, like you said. But a lot of them we could hold and make another 100k, or even in someone like McKercher's case, if he didn't get that second injury, he actually nearly could have been a keeper kind of thing. So even Caleb Windsor, he started well. I think, I can't remember what he made, maybe 100k up to that round 5 or 6 bye. A lot of people trade him out then because they're like, sweet, he's made me 100k and, I need to start upgrading. I'll get rid of him. He actually went bananas after that and probably made another 100k that people missed out on. Whereas, one of your learnings here was actually trying to get rid of the dud rookies rather than the ones that are actually still playing. So I don't know if there's a way to get rid of Zach Reed last year and get another defender. And it's hard because there's no money on Zach Reed's head. So you're actually kind of sidewaysing in a way and not getting cash out of it. But yeah, you've got that one of your learnings there of trade dead rookies first rather than rookies that are actually still playing.
Yeah. I think, and that kind of comes into that patience, not getting that immediate sugar hit. If I know that there wasn't really anyone that was like, oh yeah, I've got to grab him for Zach Reed, but there could have been a shuffle. I'm sure I could have probably moved him on, but he just sat in my team the whole year and didn't make money. And I definitely traded out some rookies well before they'd matured, and I think leaving that cash on the table and not making the cash from those that aren't generating anything certainly hampered me when I came home. And my upgrades throughout the year weren't where they should have been in terms of getting to that best 22, which I think really should be achievable with the amount of trades that we've got, with round zero, with everything sort of moving in the direction of almost having, multiple trades every week right throughout to the back end of the buys without really much concern of not having injury trades on the way home. That should be achievable, but to do that, you're going to have to be patient and extract the maximum amount of cash out of all your players, particularly rookies. And that certainly means that if a rookie's on your bench not making anything, that's gonna really hurt.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things about trying to get the full premium and, like you said, best 22, it's also really important to note that the best 22 for the first half of the year is often different than the best 22 in the second half of the year. So, people that bought into LDU around his buy got him really, really cheap and did really well. And then he was one of the best mids coming home. So it's hard to predict, and like you might see LDU sitting there at 500k and go like, oh, he's just dropped 150k, so as if I'd buy him. But if you've got a bit of confidence in them and maybe you've done a bit of fixture analysis and you can see they've got an easy run, or if there's something like that coming up, don't be scared to potentially, just don't look at who were the best 8 mids in the first half of the year and assume that they're going to be the best 8 in the second half, because it often changes, and it's often very different first half to second half.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where those trades come in. Like, if you've banked them, and I can't think of anyone that sort of dropped off on the second half of the year off the top of my head, but there would have been perfect. Yeah, and you move him on to LDU. Like, what's that? Is that 15 points a game, or close enough to?
Yeah.
Which is massive at the end of the day. And if you've got the trades to sort of do them, that's what you want them for. They're the type of moves that really help you sort of climb the ranks and put a difference between you and the other teams coming home on the bye. Because if no one's got trades, and the vast majority of the comp isn't going to, I think especially if you're up the top, so many just are so aggressive to try and maintain that. And they've got the great team. They're up the top because they started with a great team. That's your point of difference, like being super aggressive to try and maintain it and not being able to make those moves to get off those points of differences that are sort of holding you back. That's where it hurts. So 100%.
One of the other things I'm looking at more this year is some of the key stats that are available for us, like in terms of CBAs and kick-ins. I did do some research into this in the preseason, and essentially over the last 2 years, the top 10 players from top 10 mids from each of the last 2 years, so 20 players, they have all, apart from one, they've been the number 1 or the number 2 CBA mid at their club. Christian Petrarca in 2023 was the only one. He was like third banana, but he was a different beast then. So one of my learnings as well is trying to target those number 1 or number 2 mids. In the preseason, it's a bit of a prediction game. You got to try and guess who they are. But as we go through the year, you start getting that data. So, I mean, Bulldogs is a good example. I think if Ed Richards is the number 2 mid behind Bont, then he's probably going to be a knockout pick. But if he's behind Treloar, when he's back, or Libba, it gets quite a bit more sketchy. The number 3 and number 4 mids at their club are really battling to try and be top liners. I mean, Will Day is another example. If he leapfrogs Warple and Nash becomes number 2, he could be awesome. But if he's still the number 4, might be stuck in the middle. And then kick-ins is the other one that pretty much every premium defender is either the number 1 or the number 2 kick-in taker at their club. So that's something that people can look at. DFS has that data. The AFL app has that data. There's a few places that have that data. So that's something that I probably did it, but not really realizing I was doing it because I was just more looking at the SuperCoach scores and how that, rather than really deep diving into what their role in the team was. But I think that's something that people could potentially use this year as well.
Yeah, 100%. I actually heard you talking about that and sort of went and had a look at last year and how many players from different midfields scored over sort of that 110 mark. And it's just the doggies with the 2.
Yeah.
And so many teams didn't have any. That even got close to that. No, you kind of think, there's got to be more out there. There's not that many sort of knockout picks that are getting around. And if you're looking at the second or third bid, even if they present a bit of value, how much room have they possibly got to grow when they're not the first banana, second banana? If they're the third banana, even if they got a bit of value there, it is a player we'll talk about in a bit that might be in that situation. How much confidence can you actually pick them with?
Yeah, and if you know that and you're picking them maybe not to be a keeper, but to make you $80,000 and just provide maybe they've got a good buy. Like I'm thinking, I mean Clary very much could be a keeper, so that might be a bad example. But let's say you, he was third banana and only going to go 105. That might still be okay because he will get you good points on field and make you a bit of cash. He's got a nice buy, so then he could be flipped to a Bont or Sheasel or someone coming off their buy. So I think as long as you know what their role is in your team, and if they exceed that and become an ultra premium keeper, brilliant. That's a bonus. But there are some players that, like, I think Will Day is a perfect example of that, where I don't expect him to be a keeper. I don't expect him to be a 110 guy. But I'm actually not against picking him as a bit of a placeholder, make a little bit of money, and then be flipped at his buy potentially.
Yeah. And I think when you sort of talk about a guy like that, Will Day, perfect example, like say, you kind of wanting a 105 out of him and that's what you hope for. We know Will Day is capable of going 130. To average 105, he's probably also going to be capable of going 80. That's where you hold your nerve in round 2 and 3 if he hasn't gotten to 105 because it's what you picked him for. He will get there. It's a long season. But they're all, he's going to have down games. He's not going to score 105 every single week. So you've got to hold your nerve in those early rounds because he's most likely going to be on the other swing of that, and you don't want to use that trade or give up that money if it's going to be a week after price movement. So I think it's a great point. Like it's the reason you picked him in your side. You've got to know that and maybe remember that when it comes to panic trading.
Yeah, you nearly need to like write a note. I picked Will Day for this reason, and
Yeah.
he is an example of someone that actually has a really really tough first 5 rounds. So he could be averaging 90 in the first 5, and people will be looking to get rid of him. But then his rounds 6 to 10 are like nearly the easiest rounds in the comp. So he could then those that hold him could be rewarded after that. So it's an interesting one, and it goes back to our like trust your preseason research, trust your gut. Why'd you get him in the first place? Make the correctional trades on the rookies, not on this type of tier.
Yeah, I think there's nothing worse than not trusting your gut and then 3 weeks later going, "I'm an idiot. I should have trusted myself." Like it's worse than being wrong. I'd rather be wrong than now being wrong, but I would have been right if I did nothing.
Yeah, that's all right. Now, going through your learnings as well, is what else? Anything else you wanted to bring up that you've got in there? I mean, you were talking about that. I mean, round 1 you were at 30K, and then you're in at 3K by round 3, and then kind of you said you fluctuated, bounced around a bit. Um, but you're saying offline to me, maybe got a bit lucky with some of the trades you did just working out. What other
Yeah,
kind of learnings have you got?
I think it just I think it sort of comes back to everything that we've spoken about. Yeah, like you said, started poorly, 30K, but the first couple of rounds don't matter, and then really just bounced around from 800th to 2000th the rest of the season. Made so many poor trades. I didn't bring in those really good rookies early, Dempsey, Sharp, so I missed out on all that cash gen. Traded out Young and brought him back in a couple of weeks later. There was a part in the middle of the season where I brought in Anderson. I didn't want Anderson. I didn't want Took either, but they were the only two that I could afford. But I made the trade just because I wanted to maintain upgrade cadence. And that sort of, I think, put me behind the 8 ball a little bit. And then, I've made all those bad trades. Like, I'll look at my trades and it's like, there's not that many good ones in there, but I still maintained, consistent rank without doing any climbing. So, for me, like the big ones, just be patient. Don't trade out of the players that you did the preseason research in early. I think another one that I always forget about, and it's if I'm tossing up between two players, which I was, so in the preseason, it was Sarong or LDU for me. You pick the one that's going to win more games. Like, there's just a market share of the SuperCoach points. They go to the team that's going to win more games. Like, obviously, LDU had a great second half of the season, but he was poor early. He was poor in the first half of the season, and I was literally tossing up between him and Sarong, and I'm watching Sarong just mash out all these monster scores and beat people's captains. If you can't separate them, the draws are similar. You can't really make too many different calls based on their stats and where that progression might come from. Just take the player that has the more likelihood of being in a successful team, because it actually means 2, 3, 4, 500 sometimes points that team's going to share in, that your player's going to have a share of. And when teams get smacked, there's not much opportunity to put up big scores there. So that's probably another one. I'm not really faced with that in my mock team so far, but it's one that I've tried and keep in the back of my head.
Yeah, it's a good differentiator, or like a splitter when you're splitting hairs between two. And just finishing up on the learnings, when you said you were so keen on getting the upgrade cadence go that you traded in Noah Anderson when you didn't necessarily really want him or think he was going to be a top mid. Did you, in hindsight, would you, like you've talked about double downgrading, do you think it would have been actually better to double downgrade that week and then upgrade to, Merritt or someone at the top of his line that you actually wanted?
Yeah, 100%. And like I can't remember who those options were above him in that round, but I remember thinking like I wasn't happy with it, but I just did it because they were the two that were available to me. And 100%. Like I think that's what I'm going to try and remember going into this year is like if I'm faced with a player that I don't want, but I might as well just take them because it's what I can afford, just don't take them. Try and, wrangle another 80, 100 grand out of your rookies. And if it means your upgrade happens next week, your upgrade happens next week. Like this was all pre-buy and I was full pre-mode pre-buy, but they weren't the best premiums. And then I was sitting on my hands. And I'd rather not sit on your hands. And I think the buys are a really good place to actually make up ground. Like that was another thing, like coming into the buys, like because I'd done the full upgrade before we got into them, every player had to fit the buy. I couldn't actually trade around the buys and bring in the premiums off their buy. And, how many points does that leave on the table over those 3 or 4 weeks before it? If you've slowed that upgrade cadence, like at most, it might be 150. And I'm confident that on the back end of the season, if I waited, I would have made a heap more than that. So yeah, for me, it's double downgrade, look for those rookies, try and get that cash. Don't do anything. Whatever it is, it's okay to be a little bit behind the 8 ball, I think, because now how fast we are. Like in years gone by, 2021, 2022, you needed to sort of like maximize cash gen from your rookies because we didn't have enough trades, and then you would be doing your final upgrades through the buys, but you couldn't have done it any faster than that. That was the best case scenario. Sometimes you come out with 1 or 2 rookies still on field, but now we're doing it pre-buy. So I think it's fine to come out a bit slower. It's a long season. It's a longer season. So I think for me, in that situation when I'm faced with that, just don't take a player that I'm not happy with. Try and get them next week.
Yeah, I love that. Double downgrading used to be a fair part of the game when we only had limited trades and we had to get more money, bank more money to then do a big upgrade next week. And I think it's kind of phased out a little bit because, as you said, everyone's trying to rush and get full primo as quickly as possible. But full primo might be primos giving you 60, like Noah Anderson some weeks.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work out this way, but like when you look at the teams that are right up the top, typically most of them are going to have a really high team value. So they've maximized rookies. They've bought players at the bottom. And, you might not, Bont might be a good one. So he dropped a little bit last year, but a lot of people started him. I didn't. I was able to get him when he dropped. It wasn't a meaningful amount, but, 80 grand, 100 grand, like that's going to add up as you go along. And I think, maximizing that cash is really important. And if you're just doing the best that you can week to week just because you can do it, there's no way that you're going to maximize the amount of cash that you could make.
Yeah, I guess, that was an awesome chat about our learnings. I hope people got something out of it. And I think it was great that you brought to the table maybe slightly slowing down the upgrade cadence, because we don't hear many people talking about that. It's all just go, 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 go. But then, like you said, you're full primo, but you're full primo with a few average primos that you're not happy with, but you got no trades to fix it. So, yeah, that was awesome. Now, one of the questions I'm asking everyone that the Dr. Supercoach Slack wanted me to ask everyone is, who's one player that you really want to start with, but you probably don't have the guts to?
It's Noah Anderson, and I know Janice, I listened to that this morning, I know Janice said it as well. Might be for slightly different reasons. He was a killer last year. Like the roller coaster that you sit on with Noah Anderson, is shocking. But like when he's at his best, like he's as good as any footballer in the competition. He has all the traits that you would want in a superstar in your team. The inconsistency's a killer, and we'll certainly unpack him. But there's a number of factors that make me too scared too. One is like he's not on a never again list, but he hurt me. And I don't like being hurt. And I think there's a few other reasons that are a bit more informed for why I won't start him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. He's someone that I've really toyed with as well, especially with this really early fixture as North West Coast and Richmond in the first six. Could get off to a flyer, but those splits at home versus away were just crazy. If he can fix those, maybe he could get up to that upper echelon. But yeah, I saw what he did to you last year, and there were times, even me with my captaincy videos, I was recommending him as a VC plenty of times. But then all the other times it was very much avoid, don't even think about it.
Yeah. And yeah, like I did the math on it this morning, 131 at home. He only had 3 tons away from People First Stadium. Like,
Yeah.
But I think so much of it, like, it's not a him issue necessarily. Like, I don't know the numbers exactly, but like he got tagged a fair bit. Like his poor scores correlated with him being tagged. They happen to be mostly when he was away from home, and I think that's just the way that the fixture worked out. I can't remember how many of them, but it was certainly the case off the top of my head. He broke a tag. I can't remember who it was against, but he certainly broke a tag when he was at home. But it's the team. You know, if the team's doing extremely poorly, and it sort of comes back to that, pick that team that's going to be more successful because there's going to be more points. Like the team was shocking away from home. It wasn't just Noah. And then, so like, is that going to change? What is that? Is that a mentality thing? Is that just that actually People's First presents a pretty significant home ground advantage? Like it's really slippery. Like Noah Anderson is he's got the cleanest hands in the comp just about. It can be pour and rain, 35 degrees, super humidity, and he's got clean hands. He's going to use it super well. Like his game, that balance, does it come to the forefront up there? And you know, when he's on a clean deck at Marvel, maybe not so much. He doesn't have that separation, I suppose, in terms of his skill set. Again, that's more of a feel thing, but I just think in terms of what sort of would lead him to increasing that consistency, you got a couple of things like do Gold Coast become a much better team, and do they start winning away from home? I don't see all that much natural progression from them as a team in terms of that win rate coming up. You know, you'd hope that improve their ability to win away from home, but I don't really see it too much in terms of what they can do in coming up, adding a few more wins to their win rate. I might be wrong about that, but it's kind of how I feel about them. And I guess most of what we do is on feel, and it's this. He has a pretty low contested possession rate, which is another thing that correlates with high SuperCoach scores, and especially that upper echelon of midfielders. I think he's around the 37% mark. The top 8 midfielders are around the 44% mark. His tackles are really below where they would be in an elite sort of rate. His disposal rate, his contested numbers, his marks have all been relatively consistent over the last 2 years in terms of their average. And there's not that much room that I can see in them for them to grow. So like, does he increase it? Like, you know, obviously he has massive games up there and poor games away, but on an average, does his tackles and his contested possession rate come up? I don't really think so. So like, does he move up from that price stat number that he's at into the 115s that would make him a really good player? Maybe not. I don't have confidence in that. And then you throw in the buy, which makes it a bit difficult. So yeah, he's a star, but yeah, he hurt me. But I've also got way too many question marks, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And I'd probably have all those same question marks. I would like to think that Gold Coast get more consistent away versus at home, but who knows? I mean, they've missed out on the finals so many times that they feel like they have to get there soon. But I'm not willing to bet that it's going to be this year. Which is probably what Noah needs to become a premium mid. He probably needs Gold Coast to be making finals and dominating.
Yeah, and I think there's also a chance that they don't rely on him as much as well. Like he gets so much of his score from sort of those scoring chains. Like he was their leading score assist player. Rao was actually not that far behind him, which was kind of surprising to me. But then you got Flanders going to the half forward line. I suppose some of their forwards, Humphreys going into the midfield. Like, I think in terms of their mix, does that change a little bit? And does that even hurt some of that upper end of his scoring as well?
Yeah, it could do. That's yeah, like you said, Flanders and Humphreys and even some of their newer rookies are very good midfielders. So who knows? But in terms of kind of last segment and us both bringing a player to the table, we just had a really good chat about Noah Anderson. But that isn't the only player you bring to the table. That was just a little bonus one for everyone. So who's the player that you wanted to bring and have a chat about?
Connor Rozee. When I opened Supercoach Team Picker came out, he was one of the first players that I picked. Kind of just off, like, not off a hell of a lot of informed information, like, just thinking about Connor Rozee as a player. He obviously had the injuries last year with the hamstring and the ankle. He was incredibly mismanaged. At his best, he can put up massive scores. Like, he won 68 against Essendon. He tore us apart over there. He's super smooth. I think he has a really nice inside-outside game to the eye. And obviously as the captain and sort of that trajectory, like, I just looked at what he's priced at, which, what is it, 98? I thought, yeah, there's easy, increase to make him a really good starting pick. And I think the more that you look at a Connor Rozee, the more questions that come up. He's a really good superficial surface level pick, but the more you dig, the harder it is, I think, to justify picking him, or the more questions that I'm certainly coming up with.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, in 2023, Connor Rozee, he averaged 106 Supercoach. That's pretty good. It's getting close to the top level, not quite there, probably 5 points off. But last year he battled a couple of injuries, and as you said, I think he was poorly managed throughout them. He finished the year with a 97 average. It does mean he comes into this year underpriced and plenty of value. So if I looked at games where he had over 75% time on ground, so that removes essentially those 4 injury-impacted games, he averaged 104 Supercoach. So not a top-tier premium, but definitely not bad. And like you said, he had some ceiling scores in there with the 152 and a 168. The questions for me with Connor start actually with Port's midfield mix, really. So in games where Rozee had 60% or more CBAs, he averaged 110 Supercoach. So when he gets 60% CBAs, he's a premium top-tier midfielder. So if he could do that, that presents incredible value. But I think a lot of people are predicting the rise of Jason Horne-Francis this year. A lot of people are thinking it's probably a little bit at the expense of Wines and Drew. But I think a few people are also thinking it may bump down Rozee's midfield minutes as well. So I guess when we're chatting about Rozee, we probably have to chat about Port's midfield mix. And do you have any thought about how they're going to shape up and what the rotations will be or what the percentages might look like?
Yeah, it's a tough one. They ran a pretty tight rotation last year. And I think sort of towards the end of the year, Rozee's numbers decreased, but I think that he was being managed. Like, he was just sort of sitting in the forward line. So he had high time on ground, but he was also not right. So, he's kind of around that sort of 70%, 60% mark in terms of CBAs. But it really drops off. Like, Butters has a huge lion's share. Then it was either Rozee or Drew towards the back end of the year, and then sort of a mix between Wines, Jason Horne-Francis and the like. But it kind of drops off pretty significantly after that. And I think when you sort of look at that mix, like Wines, he's best 22. He can't play anywhere else. I think when you look at sort of what Rozee can give you, he can give you burst away from the stoppage. He can give you contested ball as well, but he can give you burst away from the stoppage. Butters can give you that, but he can give you inside as well. Jason Horne-Francis can give you that, but inside as well. And I think when you've got those players that can do the outside stuff, then you throw in like a Drew big body, you throw in a Wines big body. I think that's probably the right mix. And then you've got Rozee's probably, and this is more just feel, like I'm no Ken Inkley, but I feel like he's the guy that can give you some really good stuff out on the wing. Run all day, really good ball user. You put him out in space, like he has high mark numbers. He's a better ball user than Jason Horne-Francis and Butters, and he's more likely to hit those targets when he's in space. So I think for me, that's probably where you'd want to play him. Maybe the high half forward role, pushing up into the stoppage. And I think, yeah, if they're telling the truth and Jason Horne-Francis is going to be in there, Butters is certainly going to be in there. I think that other player probably is going to come from someone that's going to be in and under that big body, that player that can put on blocks for those two players that can burst away from the stoppage. And that's probably not Rozee. So he does feel like he's probably going to be the odd one out. Obviously, he's a very close watch in the practice game. But yeah, for me, that's kind of how I'm feeling about it. But like, my instant thought when I put him in my team was certainly, no, it's going to be Butters and Rozee. They're going to be in there.
Yeah, I'm wrestling with this as well. If I had to pick it, I think Butters and Jason Horne-Francis will be the main two CBA guys in terms of getting the highest percentage. Picking number 3, 4, 5 between Rozee, Wines, and Drew, I'm not sure. I think it could go in any of those order. It wouldn't surprise me a huge amount. But yeah, I think I've got Butters and Horne-Francis as 1 and 2, or 2 and 1, whichever way they go. So whichever way you spin it, I think Rozee's at best the third CBA mid. And as we said before, like, you want the 1 or 2 CBA mids in your SuperCoach team. They're the ones that can become premium midfielders. Some teams, like the Bulldogs, can have 3 midfielders go over 100, but not many teams do that. Like, it's the number 3 midfielder is not really someone that you want if you're hoping that they're going to be a premium midfielder. For him as well, it's unfortunate he has that round 12 bye, along with a lot of our other premiums. So, there's North and Port and Carlton and Bulldogs all on that bye. So we can't have too many of them. If he had a later bye, I could see him as someone that you might have there. Maybe he could make you 80k, and then you flip him to Bont or someone coming off their bye. But you can't do that when he has the first bye. And for me, I don't mind. I quite like having a slot of about this price in my team as someone that has upside to maybe be a keeper if things go right for him. But for me, it's him or Ed Richards. They're fighting over the same spot. They're the same. They're pretty much the same price. They have the same buy. I don't want them both. I'm going to have to choose one. And at the moment, I'm choosing Ed Richards because I think he's probably more likely to be a number 2 CBA mid, whereas I think Rozee's at a number 3 at best.
Yeah, 100%. I think we're on the same page. And yeah, he's only in 7% of teams, 6% of teams. But yeah, I think he's certainly one that sort of, he meets a lot of the eye test criteria and the vibe criteria, but yeah, when you dig deeper, he doesn't. And I think, you're right. If he's the third best mid or the third most dominant midfielder in that team, he ain't getting close to what we need out of him. Even though he will present value, I think, at that price, and he will outperform it, I don't think he'll get close enough to it where he warrants the use of a trade to move him on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then the guy I wanted to bring to the table is someone that you and I were DMing about right up until the lockout last year. I actually had Jai Newcomb in this spot, and then after a chat, we're like, oh no, I think we'll pivot to Tom Green. So Tom Green's someone I wanted to chat about because we both started him last year, both big fans. But so in 2023, Tom Green, he averaged 112 SuperCoach. He reached that top tier of midfielders of the comp. Last year, he copped that injury very early in the game against Geelong, was subbed out on 5 points. It gave him a season average of 106. If you remove that game, he averaged 111 for the season. So very similar to what he did the year before if you get rid of that injury game. We know he's a routine captain option. He went over 136 times last year. And the good thing about him, it's often in the predictable matchups against the easy teams. So it gives you comfort that you can forecast when he's going to go big. You can put the C on him. So, there's something to be said about that. So for the reasons mentioned above, I think he's got about 5 points of value baked in just from that injury-affected game. But he also has the early bye, the round 2 bye, and that's the reason I think a lot of people aren't starting him at the moment. But you and I, we both started him last year, Tommy, and we reaped the rewards from it. We got those early 130s and 150 captaincy scores. This season, his starting draw isn't as easy. He's got Collingwood in round 0, which I think he should score well against, but we don't get that score. He's then got Melbourne, who were easy last year, but I think they're going to be very improved. And he's also got Hawthorn and St Kilda in his first 5, who are tough. The one I didn't mention is a round 4 meeting with West Coast. That could be a 150. That could be his one big one. So if he was a great starting pick with an early bye last year, why aren't we doing it this year? Is it because his draw isn't as nice, or have we learnt not to start round 0 premiums?
I think it's a combination of factors. For me, full disclosure, he's not one that I'm looking at starting at the moment. I think like he was a good starting pick last year, but I think we've seen with just about every single other round zero premium, they weren't. He really in the end he probably didn't turn out to be a good because anyone that started him wore that injury affected sub 10. So at the end of the day he didn't actually turn out to be a good starting pick either. It was nice to ride those couple of games though. So I think for me like you've got the combination with an early buy. Whatever he scores in those other games, it sort of takes a little bit of that cap off. I think I overestimated how much that would be last year based on what the rookies could score, sort of that difference between one of your premiums and the absolute floor of your side. With best 18 probably wasn't as much as I expected. Obviously we had some great rookies last year, which helped that. But yeah, still, what is it? 20, 30, maybe 40 points, the difference between 115 and a 60, I suppose, from a rookie. That's basically what you're getting from Tom Green in a game that he doesn't play because you could have that opportunity, that cost opportunity to have another premium. So for me, that's probably a big factor. And I think just given what he's priced at, 106, if you think that he's going to join that absolute upper echelon of the premium, sort of that 115, 116 really is the number. It has been for a few years around that top 8, that absolute best 22 team. I think he's a fair enough start because if he's gonna average that, he's gonna make the cash, and you're probably getting in at the ground floor because he's a round zero team. That price is going to move fast as well. So I think that's probably the discussion that needs to be had. What is his ceiling? What is his average going to be? And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts because I've got my own.
He's interesting because he's someone that a lot of preseasons, quite a few of us think he could be that next guy to jump into that 115 to 120 tier. And there were plenty of people last year predicting him to become that 120 player, which very few players do. But he also, like his disposal efficiency and his turnovers are very, very high, which really cap him in Supercoach. And I think that is the way he plays. Like he's the one extracting it, just flicking a handball out, hoping a teammate gets on the end of it. And I don't really see that changing either. So I he is someone that I could see going on stretches of a 120 for sure, but maintaining that for a whole year maybe now seems like a bit of a stretch just with his disposal efficiency.
Yeah, yeah, that's basically the same thinking that I have. I think the other thing for Green is the tackles. So he averages about 4 tackles per game. You mentioned the disposal efficiency and the clangers. Like 4 tackles per game is not enough, especially for that inside sort of bull type mid. And he's had the opportunity to lift that, and he just hasn't. His disposal rate per game is already elite with 31. His contested possession rate is already really elite at 50%. So like that's not going to improve. The tackles haven't shown that they're going to improve. The other things I don't think can improve in terms of his disposal efficiency and his clangers. And then I sort of went back, sort of having to think about him and had a look at what the other players that have averaged over 116 have been over the last couple of years, and those players that are kind of a similar mould to him. So I went back to 2021. You got Laird, Walsh, Mitchell, Bont, Oliver, Miller, Steele in that year. 2022, Laird, Oliver, Neal, Miller, Bont. 2023, Bont again, Miller, Track, Laird, Merritt, Oliver. And then last year it was Bont, Butters, Neal, Flanders, Dacos, Heaney, and Treloar in terms of those midfielders. Like he obviously most closely correlates, maybe Laird, but Tom Mitchell for sure. Clayton Oliver, Took Miller, Steele, like in terms of their role within the team. And that's one thing that all those players have in common. They're tackle animals. And that's kind of the difference between them. Disposal efficiency, not that great. Kind of in line with Tom Green. Contested possession rate, right up there. Tom Green as good, if not better than most of them. The difference is those tackles. They're all like 8, 9, 10 tackles most games, where Green's sitting around 4.5, and that's just not going to cut it. That's where that difference is. That easily puts Tom Green from a 108, 112 guy up into that 118, 120 if he lifts those tackles. And he's been that number one guy in that midfield for a couple of years, and it hasn't happened. So for me, like where does that progression come from? It's not natural. He doesn't become a better player. I kind of think, like, in terms of who he is as a player, that's kind of capped. It's that tackle numbers, that work rate. Does that increase? If it does, that's awesome. Like, he will be that guy, and I think you would pay that you'd start him, irrespective of the buy. But if he's not going to improve that, there's probably not much improvement left in him, apart from sort of removing that injury affected game, which I think is mitigated by the fact that he has an early buy.
Yeah, I think that's some really good analysis, because when we do look at those top tier mids, Jack Steele for a big stretch of his premium stuff was like a 7 tackles per game average guy. So Tom Green's nearly half of that. So that does, I think you're right, put a cap, and probably means he can't be a 120 guy unless he becomes a really good tackler, which I don't think we can predict that he will, because, like you said, it just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, there's nothing, like, he might for sure. But how old's Tommy Green? He's 24.
Let's go with that.
Yeah, let's go with that. In terms of where he is, like, those guys that have that fight for the ball, that instinct to tackle hard, they had that coming in.
Yeah.
He's not getting them, and he's the guy that's around that coalface. He has that high CBA number in comparison to the rest of his team, particularly over the last year, with the sort of the thinning out of that midfield, and it still hasn't been there. I probably don't have a good answer for why, but it's just not. So, without the buy, I'd pay for him, I think. It's just I don't think there's enough there with the buy.
Yeah, I agree. I think without the buy, the 5 points of upside that are kind of baked in from the injury, that's probably enough. But without the buy, I don't think it is. And I think you've laid out quite well why we're skeptical he can't be a 120 guy anymore unless tackles really change. So, yeah, I think that's a great chat. And also, we don't have the benefit of him playing North and West Coast in a row straight up like we did last year to be a captaincy guy.
Yeah. I guess the other thing as well, tags.
Yep.
They really became in vogue last year. I feel like it happens every year, and I don't know if this is just me just thinking about it, but kind of halfway through the season, a couple teams start using it, and then a few more start using it, and then round one, no one's using it again. And then just before the buys, people start using it again, and it's kind of this cycle. But last year, I think it was more in vogue than it ever has been, and I wouldn't be surprised if it sort of starts and kicks off that way. GWS with Bedford, they're probably the number one at it, and if they're giving up a mid, it's that balance. Like, are you happy for Tom Green to be impacted while the others aren't? I think if they're going to be tagged, it's going to go to Green most likely, unless we see a massive lift or a change in role for Kelly. He goes in, or Callahan just sets the world on fire. It's probably going to be Green. That's also something to think about as well. Like, you stop Green at the coalface, he's their main sort of extractor. Is that something that teams are going to look to target? It's a possibility.
Yeah, for sure. That was an awesome episode, Tommy. It's great to get you on Dr. Supercoach podcast. Like I said, I've been listening to you and Selby through the Moreira's Magic one for quite a few years now, and always thought, that our play style aligns well. So it's great to get you on and learn a bit about our learnings from last year. Where can people find you, and I guess what do you have going on this year? I know you've been a bit busy outside of Supercoach at the minute, but you're going to be doing the podcast with Selby again this year.
Yeah, weekly podcast with Selby over at Moreira's Magic. I'm sure you'll chuck it in the link or something. I'm not going to spell it. It's kind of how you guess to spell it. I certainly don't know how, and I've been looking at it for 2 years. I've only just learned how to say it. So, Moreira's Magic, weekly podcast for Supercoach. Selby, obviously, who was on an episode a couple of weeks ago, does his AFL fantasy podcast with Xavier Ellis, and I think for I'm only on the podcast, so I get on there and I get to chat to Selby, who I think is probably the best brain in fantasy. He sees it as good as anyone, and I think the season guide that he puts together in terms of the stats, the analysis of each individual player, that is part of that sort of Moreira's Magic platform, is as good as any. And I think come to listen to me dribble, I suppose, but certainly I think what you're signing up for is listening to Selby, and he sees, he'll certainly pick up on the players as quick as anyone in the comp that are sort of breaking out or having that role shift. So yeah, really encourage anyone that wants to join on, and it's, I guess, the good cause as well. Selby donates a fair bit of money to the Starlight Foundation every year as part of it. So yeah, that's what I'll be. I'm on Twitter as well. I don't even know my handle. If you search Dyslexia Untied, it might come up. I'm sure you'll tag me in the notes. So yeah, I'm happy for anyone to chuck me a DM, and I'll try and answer questions if I've got the chance.
Awesome. Thanks so much again for your time. And yeah, I'll let people know where they can find moreirasmagic.com.au, and it's an awesome research, like you said. Donations go to the Starlight Foundation to give wishes for sick kids. Selby does his pre-season content where you get a lot of information, but then you get to hear from Tommy and Selby throughout the year with some of the best insights in the business. So thanks for your time, Tommy. For the listeners listening to this, don't forget to subscribe, turn your notifications on. We've got still a couple more of these to go, but it's getting pretty close to the start of the season, and maybe Bombers winning a final this year, Tommy.
Oh, I think there's more chance of that happening than me actually following my learnings from last year. So I won't hold my breath, but I'll have to come back and watch this when I'm thinking about making a dumb move. But yeah, hopefully we just get a couple wins, mate.
Sounds good. Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, mate.